Thank you. It was an excellent speech. Now, I would like to ask a question on the discrepancies between countries of EU and how to maintain a proper job guarantee so that it just functions well. After Poland joined the EU, we have seen that over 2.5 million people left Poland looking for better wages and better conditions in the richer countries of EU. And it's no wonder, because a registered nurse in Germany has a monthly wage couple times more than in Poland. So now, how do we secure a job guarantee that allows this nurse or this doctor to stay locally in the member state or in the region and work there instead of having this massive brain drain? Thank you.
Thank you very much for this question. Absolutely. I think we need to recognize that unemployment is the structural factor that is driving these labor flows, right? That people are moving under conditions of duress. Now, imagine a scenario where we have a policy that supports local job guarantee, and all the proposals are for central funding, but for local administration. And the experiments that I listed are also managed this way. And so now imagine a policy that is local job creation in the areas of need. So if there are food deserts, if there are public health deserts, which we know even in Europe exist, when there is a shortage, acute shortage of care for young or the elderly or people with disabilities, then we create the projects in the very communities. That then prevents really the kind of labor mobility we're talking about that happens under duress, and it then happens under the proper circumstances. If there is any flow, that as we normally know that there will be some, at least it is done in a way that is not driven by economic insecurity. And you know, a lot of people don't want to leave their homes and their communities, but they're compelled to do so when there are no opportunities available to them.
Thank you. Thank you, Pavlina, for your presentation. As you know very well, an important distinction is the one between automation and artificial intelligence. Now, what's the implication of that in terms of jobs creation, destruction? That whereas automation tends to displace low-skilled people, low-skilled workers, artificial intelligence tends to displace high-skilled people. That is the point. So it's not like in the past where you can guarantee jobs locally because you can invent forms. Because the very moment, and that moment in 10 years' time will occur, when artificial intelligence will start displacing the intermediate level skilled people, there will be room only for the super skilled people. Because the super skilled, they will never have any competition coming from in artificial intelligence. So in your opinion, how can we cope with this problem? Because this is the problem. Whereas it is reasonably easy enough to maintain jobs for the low skills. We know the ways. But what about the higher skill, but not super skilled people?
Thank you. I think these are really important structural changes. And the debate on the impact of tech change on net job creation actually is not settled. When we look at the concentration of unemployment, it is always at the lower end of the income distribution. People of high skill and middle income folks do not experience the prolonged and deep spells of unemployment that the people at the lower end experience. So while I appreciate the point that, yes, there is displacement, there is a hollowing out of good middle-class jobs, and there's some tech displacement at the higher level, those folks don't experience too much economic insecurity. They have the wealth and the assets to weather the storm, and they are rehired very quickly. My personal opinion is that the vast majority of the jobs of the future have not been invented yet, right? So there will be a lot more new job creation, but we still are left with that acute problem that is always with us: mass impoverishment and unemployment. We have not secured the floor. And so, we have so much environmental work before us. I don't even think that low skill is an argument that we, an obstacle rather, that we cannot create employment opportunities. Planting a tree, it provides the lungs of a city. It might be considered not very high skill, but it is absolutely critical and essential. And so we have a lot of environmental work to do, and we can employ people of various skill level, and we will still have work to spare to staff. I also think that it's not technology that's the threat, it's the climate crisis that is doing the mass job destruction around. And so my answer is, we're not hopeless. We just need to recognize that there is a role for the public sector to directly employ and directly invest in those areas.
Please.
Elaborating on this public jobs in the public sector, one of the problems in Poland was that even though we did have a good agency, governmental agency for tracking the communicable diseases, it was so underfunded that in fact, there was hardly anyone working there. So theoretically, there was a structure, but the structure was unable to conduct this job because of the salaries there. And so the problem with public investment is that if you invest in such structures, you have to make sure that these are not, those very low salaried jobs. And when it comes to, because the panel here is about the accessible healthcare, and Jan Zygmuntowski told about the nurses leaving Eastern Europe to Western European countries for competitive salaries, but we also have the problem of not of unemployment or of people leaving Poland or Eastern Europe because of seeking higher salaries, but for instance, doctors leaving Poland or Romania, for that matter, for better working conditions. Mm-hmm. So it's not a problem of competitive salaries because they can learn quite a lot in Poland, but that means longer hours and at the lower job quality. So I think that it's when coming back to the job guarantee, we talk about job guarantee in Europe, but again, one of the reasons why the testing or vaccination program, say in Poland, have not worked as well as they did, apart from anti-vaccination movement, was that there was no paid leave for those wanting to get vaccinated. So I think there is a lot of different elements. We're talking about this big picture, but when you get into the real life, you see that there is this optimization towards low costs in the public sphere is actually blocking most of those big ideas.
Thank you for that. I acknowledge the obstacles, a great many. And I think perhaps one of the first ones to recognize is that this paradigm of tying the hands of the public sector is enormously destructive. And that first, it's based on some myths about what governments can and cannot do. The myths that governments can run out of funding. We saw, it was the clearest teachable moment, COVID, and of course 2008, that when faced with crisis, not to mention wars, when faced with crisis and a collective decision to spend on some mission, the public sector uses its public purse to do so. Now, in Europe, we have institutionalized certain rules that prevent governments from doing so, which is the reason why we had to relax them and break them to allow them to respond to this crisis. And so the first, I think one of the biggest obstacles and challenges that we need to overcome is how to think about government funding and their capacity to fund their local priorities, their policy priorities, to give them and endow them with that power. So yes, austerity has definitely starved our public sector. It has starved our services, and we are paying the price. We need to do a lot of remedial work to restaff those essential services and do a lot more. Number two, the job guarantee, not a panacea to all labor market problems, no doubt. I certainly do not want to oversell it. What the job guarantee does, it secures a basic floor, a guaranteed employment at a wage benefit package. Now, what would that benefit package be? I think that that's a conversation for Europe to have as a whole. What do we aspire to? What should be the labor standard? Minimum wage consistent with, whatever economic conditions, minimum benefits that we consider to be commensurate with dignified employment, paid leave, as you said, retirement, retirement benefits, etc. And so, yes, we need to have that conversation, and that will provide just the very basic safety net that we are currently missing. The other thing is, that from a macroeconomic perspective, unemployment is always the buffer. People are always the collateral damage. We have a small hiccup in the economy and it's their mass layoffs. So when we stabilize the floor, when we stabilize those, huge fluctuations in economic activity, it actually creates an environment of well-being and prosperity that engenders a lot more employment opportunities and better employment opportunities.
Thank you. Well, there are a lot of other questions, but this time we are lucky because we can move to the general discussion, and those questions can be proposed within the context of the general discussion.